If you win the 2020 election, what would you say in your first call with Russian President Vladimir Putin?
It's a fun moment. Well, first I'd say, I'm sorry I beat your guy. And second, I would say the days of meddling in American elections are over, and we will take any undermining of our democratic processes as an act of hostility and aggression.
With all due deference to the fact that this is a presidential debate, Donald Trump got punked. He has conducted foreign policy since day one, born out of a very fragile ego.
It is time to bring our troops home. But unlike Trump, I will not do it through a tweet at 3 o'clock in the morning.
We do not have a 21st century security strategy coming from this president. After all, he's relying on 17th century security technologies like a moat full of alligators or a big wall.
I know that members of this committee frequently frame these complicated issues in the form of a simple question: was there a quid pro quo? As I testified previously, with regard to the requested White House call and the White House meeting, the answer is yes. Mr. Giuliani conveyed to Secretary Perry, Ambassador Volker, and others that President Trump wanted a public statement from President Zelensky committing to investigations of Burisma and the 2016 election. Mr. Giuliani expressed those requests directly to the Ukrainians, and Mr. Giuliani also expressed those requests directly to us. We all understood that these prerequisites for the White House call and the White House meeting reflected President Trump's desires and requirements. Everyone was in the loop. It was no secret. Everyone was informed via email on July 19th, days before the presidential call. As I communicated to the team, I told President Zelensky in advance that assurances to run a fully transparent investigation and turn over every stone were necessary in his call with President Trump. As ambassador, I've had hundreds of meetings and calls with individuals, but I'm not a note taker or a memo writer. Never have been. My job requires that I speak with heads of state, senior government officials, members of the cabinet, the president, almost each and every day. Talking with foreign leaders might be memorable to some people, but this is my job. I do it all the time. My lawyers and I have made multiple requests to the State Department and the White House for these materials. Yet these materials were not provided to me, and they have also refused to share these materials with this committee. These documents are not classified, and in fairness, should have been made available. In the absence of these materials, my memory, admittedly, has not been perfect. A few critical points have been obscured by noise over the last few days and weeks, and I'm worried that the bigger picture is being ignored. So let me make a few key points. First, Secretary Perry, Ambassador Volker, and I worked with Mr. Rudy Giuliani on Ukraine matters at the express direction of the President of the United States. We did not want to work with Mr. Giuliani. Simply put, we were playing the hand we were dealt. We all understood that if we refused to work with Mr. Giuliani, we would lose a very important opportunity to cement relations between the United States and Ukraine. So we followed the President's orders. Second, although we disagreed with the need to involve Mr. Giuliani, at the time we did not believe that his role was improper. Third, let me say, precisely because we did not think that we were engaging in improper behavior, we made every effort to ensure that the relevant decision makers at the National Security Council and the State Department knew the important details of our efforts. The suggestion that we were engaged in some irregular or rogue diplomacy is absolutely false. Fourth, as I testified previously, Mr. Giuliani's requests were a quid pro quo for arranging a White House visit for President Zelensky. Mr. Giuliani demanded that Ukraine make a public statement announcing the investigations of the 2016 election DNC server and Burisma. Mr. Giuliani was expressing the desires of the President of the United States, and we knew these investigations were important to the President. Fifth, in July and August of 2019, we learned that the White House had also suspended security aid to Ukraine. I was adamantly opposed to any suspension of aid. I was adamantly opposed to any suspension of aid, as the Ukrainians needed those funds to fight against Russian aggression. I tried diligently to ask why the aid was suspended, but I never received a clear answer. Still haven't to this day. In the absence of any credible explanation for the suspension of aid, I later came to believe that the resumption of security aid would not occur until there was a public statement from Ukraine committing to the investigations of the 2016 elections and Burisma, as Mr. Giuliani had demanded. Finally, at all times, I was acting in good faith. I was acting in good faith. As a presidential appointee, I followed the directions of the President. We worked with Mr. Giuliani because the President directed us to do so. We had no desire to set any conditions. We had no desire to set any conditions on the Ukrainians. Indeed, my own personal view, which I shared repeatedly with others, was that the White House and security assistance should have proceeded without preconditions of any kind.
My first Senate race, I literally called everyone I knew and I set what is still an all-time Senate record. I raised $17,000 from ex-boyfriends. And I'd like to point out of the women on the stage, I'm focusing here on my fellow women senators. Do I think that we would be standing on that stage if we had the experience that he had? No, I don't. Maybe we're held to a different standard. First of all, I've made very clear I think that Pete is qualified to be up on this stage, and I am honored to be standing next to him. But what I said was true. Women are held to a higher standard. Otherwise, we could play a game called Name Your Favorite Woman President, which we can't do because it has all been men. And if you think a woman can't beat Donald Trump, Nancy Pelosi does it every single day.
If you want to get elected president, the best way to do so is to find a way to win the debates you are in. And I just happen to have a few handy-dandy tips on how to do just that. Tip number 1, tell your life story in the most favorable possible terms.
Who am I? Why am I here?
Americans love up from the bootstrap stories. You came from nothing, and then you worked hard, and now you're here. And you represent something great about our democracy.
I was born and raised in Oklahoma. I have 3 older brothers. They all joined the military.
When I got out of law school, I moved into the inner city of Newark to fight as a tenant lawyer for other people's rights.
I have the experience of being in a marriage that exists by the grace of a single vote on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Tip number 2, have a few planned lines, in your pocket to go to when your opponents inevitably challenge you on your weak spots.
I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
One thing you have to remember when you're about to roll out that pre-planned line, take your time and make sure you say it right.
When I hear your new ideas, I'm reminded of that ad. Where's the beef?
Yeah.
Now, what you say obviously matters in a debate or when you're running for president. But tip number 3 deals with how you look. Remember, this is a TV program. How you look, healthy, confident, not healthy, not confident, is conveyed to people. You want to be confident without being arrogant. You want to be knowledgeable without being a know-it-all.
Wrong. That's wrong. That's totally wrong.
Tip number 4, use real people stories. Like I once knew a reporter from Washington named Chris, and he told me, pick good people and anecdotes and use them sparingly.
Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
Tip number 5, try to make a moment, but don't try too hard. I know this seems contradictory, but what you want in this age of viral sharing is something that will get sent around for days and weeks after the debate ends.
There was a little girl in California who was part of the 2nd class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
Tip number 6, get and keep your facts straight. If you are going to attack one of your opponents, you must have that attack be airtight.
14 days before he called the attack in Benghazi an act of terror.
Get the transcript.
He did, in fact, sir. So let me call it an act of terror.
Can you say that a little louder, Candy?
Tip number 7, avoid unforced errors. This one is somewhat obvious, yes, but remember, the spotlight is on these candidates. But as the past has shown, mistakes get made.
It's 3 agencies of government when I get there that are gone. Commerce, education, and the, what's the third one there? Let's see.
So that's it. 7 quick and easy-ish tips on how to stand out in a presidential debate. And remember, if you don't stand out in a debate, you're never going to be standing up to get inaugurated president.